Yo guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts on Wandavision episode 6. If you guys are new around here, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on so you get notified anytime I upload a new video or I go live. But without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Content-wise, this episode was awesome. I enjoyed every second of it. But in terms of the long story, I guess you could say, the overall story, we didn't really get much in this episode. Marvel keeps adding questions to our plates, but they never really give us any answers. Last episode, we got introduced to Quicksilver, and this episode never really mentioned that introduction at all. It kind of went straight into him living with them. To me, that makes no sense. I feel like we deserve some sort of explanation. Yes, in my opinion, it was super cool that we got to see Vision leaving the bubble and all that kind of stuff. It was super dope. But again, from an overarching story standpoint, we didn't get anything. One thing I want to talk about was the time jump in this episode. I would expect this episode to take place in the 90s, but actually it took place in the late 90s going into the 2000s. I'm not going to complain about this because I do want to start seeing more stuff in the modern era, and I think it would be super dope to see the whole town of Westview modernized. So again, I'm not complaining about the time jump. I thought it was just kind of weird at first. Next thing I want to talk about is kind of going back to Quicksilver. That kind of dynamic between Quicksilver and Wanda was awesome throughout the entire episode. Whether it was in the beginning, their personalities just bouncing off of each other, or towards the middle and the end of the episode, whenever Quicksilver started to question Wanda. Now, this Quicksilver actually seems to be Quicksilver, not like some other dude in Quicksilver's body, for example, Mephisto, like we all thought. He has that same backstory as Wanda, but that kind of makes no sense if it's the Fox character, because the Fox character actually grew up in America. But we know in this episode, he talks about trick-or-treating with Wanda when they were little kids. These storylines are really messy, and I really want them to clear stuff up to us, but I just don't see them giving any answers, and that's kind of what's frustrating about the show right now. We're only getting loaded up with questions. We're not really getting any answers. I also like the way that they kind of implemented the twins into this episode. The twins also broke the fourth wall in this episode, talking to the camera and kind of interacting with the audience, I guess you could say. I thought it was super dope that the twins got some more screen time. It was cool to see them interact with Quicksilver. I just thought their chemistry was also just as good as Quicksilver and Wanda. I don't know. Overall, the contents of this episode were super awesome. Just like the interactions between all the characters. The character development, I think, for Wiccan and Speed were also really good and really well done. Their Halloween costumes resembled big parts of their costumes inside of the comics, so I thought it was pretty cool to see that parallel. So I think the biggest part of this episode was when Vision started to explore the town. I think it was super dope that we finally got to see Vision also breaking that fourth wall. I mean, fourth wall is usually to the camera, but I'm talking about like in the show he's breaking the fourth wall. Not the show that we're watching, but the show that he is literally inside. He starts exploring the little parts of the hex, and I just thought that was super dope to see him finally getting more confident, I guess, and kind of taking that risk of whatever happens, let me just figure out what the hell is going on here. His interaction with Agnes inside of the car was super duper creepy. I actually have a theory about Agnes that I want to go into later on in the video, but Agnes is really confusing me as of now because she was kind of tapped into that frozen state as everyone was, like on the border and on the side of Westview. If you guys remember in the episode, there were people like glitching out and that lady's like tear was running down her cheek. It was super scary stuff, and I feel like that was the great horror aspect that they did in this show. They're doing a great job of just slowly bringing in horror stuff and kind of not even just horror, but like just suspenseful stuff that you would never expect Marvel to do. But going back to Vision leaving Westview and the whole bubble area, the visuals were awesome. I also really liked the particle effect that they did when he was leaving the hex and it was kind of pulling him back. And this also, in my opinion, shows how powerful Wanda is. He's literally getting sucked back into the town because that's where Wanda wants him. Also, I've seen a lot of people confused on Twitter as to why he was like falling into like pieces and little particles and he was getting teared apart. I think this is because the state that his body was in before Wanda brought him into Westview, or the Hex, was he was getting torn apart by sword agents. Now, there's a whole theory about how sword agents wanted to kind of create Ultron and how he could come back using components from Vision's dead body. And I don't really know my stance on that theory, but in my opinion, the reason why Vision was getting torn into bits and pieces was because that was the state of his body before he got brought into the Hex. Before I get into the part about Wanda literally expanding the Hex, I want to just talk about how Wanda doesn't really know how this reality was created. I don't remember specifically or exactly what she said, but it seemed like she didn't really know how she got placed there or how everything was created. Now, my theory behind this is that maybe she was just sitting there with Vision's dead body, or after she took Vision's dead body from the Sword Agency or Sword Headquarters, and maybe she was just thinking of the life that she could have had if Vision was still alive. Now again, this just shows how powerful Wanda is, because maybe it was something in her subconscious that she wasn't even thinking about and it just popped up and just happened. I'm excited to see where the show goes. Hopefully it actually ramps up towards the next 3 episodes, because I feel like after every single episode the last few weeks, I've just been saying, oh yeah, it's gonna get better from here. Oh, it's gonna get more intense, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It never really happens. We just keep getting questions and questions. We never get any answers. Now, the last 5 minutes of the episode were crazy, but on the other hand, the last 5 minutes of every single episode is literally crazy. And that's another thing that I don't really like about the show. All the episodes basically have the same format. The first 20 to 25 minutes is just the same stuff. It's just character building, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The story never actually moves forward. But in the last 5 minutes of every episode, something goes down. I wish that the story was moving in the first 25 minutes of the episode, because I'm waiting an entire week for the content, but there's only 5 minutes of content that's genuinely valuable for the story. But enough of my complaints. Now we're going to talk about the last 5 minutes of this episode. Basically, Wiccan starts using his powers. He hears Vision screaming and then he tells Wanda about it. Wanda literally pauses time. Now this just shows how crazy powerful this woman is. She basically expands the hex to where it goes over Vision's body, so it kind of brings him back to life. And on top of that, the hex keeps on expanding and kind of takes in Darcy. It also consumes a bunch of other sword agents and their base. Now it's crazy to think that Wanda can literally expand her reality, and at this point we don't know how big she can even expand it to. Maybe she can take over the whole world and everything becomes an alternate reality. And it wouldn't really feel weird to everyone else, because by that time it'd be in modern day. So unless they were doing something to exactly disrupt what Wanda wanted, then there's really no point of her having to change anything. This could also help us leading into Spider-Man 3 if all the other Spider-Mans actually show up. Everything really lines up into place if Wanda changes the whole world into her own reality. This could also set her up as being the villain in Multiverse of Madness. The ending of this episode was super crazy, but now I want to talk about my theory of Agnes. As I mentioned before, I thought it was super creepy that Agnes didn't really know anything as to what was going on. Now we all know that Agnes wasn't identified when SWORD was doing the identification of all of the citizens of Westview. Now we all thought this was because she was obviously a witch or something like that. Maybe she just wasn't there before and she kind of put herself into that reality, because we all thought that Wanda didn't have 100% complete power over her reality. And obviously I still don't think Wanda has 100% control, but I have another theory as to how Agnes might have gotten there. When we think of multiverse, at least the first thing that I think of is Spider-Man. There's only one Spider-Man movie so far that actually plays with multiverses, and that's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. In that movie, Liz Octavius, she is voiced by the girl who plays Agnes. So Agnes voices Liz Octavius. Now yes, this could all be a coincidence because Donald Glover voices someone in Into the Spider-Verse, and so does Haley Steinfeld, and she's playing Hawkeye's daughter. What supports my theory even more is that at the end of the movie, Liz Octavius gets hit by a truck, but then we don't see anything of her afterwards. Now this could mean one of two things. Obviously she could die right then and there, or as that truck was going into the collider, she could have gone in with it. And as we all know, when you go into the collider, you go into a different multiverse. This could lead to her getting into the regular MCU universe. I know we can't directly go off of deleted scenes, but there is a deleted scene in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse where Liz Octavius literally jumps into the collider. There has to be a reason that they didn't put it in the movie. Maybe it's because it was going to be too confusing for general audiences, but we'll never know. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff that could refute this theory, like how would she know what the Avengers are? How would she know who Vision and Wanda are? And also, how would she already know a bunch of stuff about Wanda in the alternate reality? She's done so many weird things inside the reality, like kind of asking Wanda, oh, you want me to do this again, whatever. She's done some sus stuff in the reality, and I always know that this theory isn't even going to be 100% true. I don't think this theory is right at all. It's just a speculation. So what you guys thought of this episode in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Peace.